Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day everyone. Today my group and I will be presenting on the topic of audit documentation and sampling. Today I would like to explain about audit documentation. First, according to International Standard Accounting, audit documentation is defined as the record of audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and conclusion reached by the auditor. This means that audit documentation is very important because it shows what the auditor has done, what evidence is collected, and how the auditor makes decisions. Next, auditors should prepare and organize their working papers properly. This is important to ensure that the audit work can be carried out efficiently and effectively. Well-organized working paper also helps others auditor to understand the work done, also provide proof that the audit was conducted properly. Lastly, auditors should avoid preparing unnecessary working papers. This means they should not keep too many documents that are not useful. For examples, auditors should avoid making too many copies of the client's accounting records, as this will only waste time and space. Now I will explain the purpose of audit documentation. First, audit documentation provides a sufficient and appropriate record for the auditor's report. This means it shows the basis of the auditor's opinion and proof that the audit was conducted according to the international standard on auditing and other legal requirements. Next, audit documentation helps in the effective supervision of audit work. Supervisor can review the working papers to ensure that audit staff are performing their tasks correctly and following proper procedures. In addition, audit documentation ensures that audit staff are accountable for work they perform. This means every task done can be traced back to the person responsible. Lastly, it helps to retain important information for future audits. This allows auditor to refer back to past record, especially for significant matters that may affect future audit work. Today, I would like to explain about audit documentation. First, according to International Standard Accounting, audit documentation is defined as the record of audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and conclusion reached by the auditor. This means that audit documentation is very important because it shows what the auditor has done, what evidence is collected, and how the auditor makes decisions. Next, auditors should prepare and organize their working papers properly. This is important to ensure that the audit work can be carried out efficiently and effectively. Well-organized working paper also helps others auditor to understand the work done, also provide proof that the audit was conducted properly. Lastly, auditors should avoid preparing unnecessary working papers. This means they should not keep too many documents that are not useful. For examples, auditors should avoid making too many copies of the client's accounting records, as this will only waste time and space. Next, I will explain about audit file. An audit file refers to one or more folder or storage media, either in physical or electronic form, that contain all the record of audit documentation for a specific audit engagement. In simple terms, it is where auditors keep all the important documents related to their audit work. There are two types of audit file, which is permanent audit file and current audit file. The purpose of the permanent audit file are first to record items that are applicable over many years, meaning important information that can be used in the future audits. The second, to provide a summary of the entity's policy and organization, so auditor can easily understand the company's structure and operation. And the last one is to preserve working papers for items that rarely change, so auditor do not need to prepare the same information every year. Content of the permanent audit file. First is the organizational structure. This shows the company's management structure and reporting lines, helping auditor understand roles and responsibility in the organization. Second one is the nature of business. This explains what the company does, such as its main activities, product or services, so auditor can understand how the business operates. The last one is the auditing policy. These are the methods used by the company in preparing financial statements such as depreciation method or inventory valuation. That's all from me. Now I will pass the presentation to the next person.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Noor Ansalha binti Sharwa Hasrin. My metric number is F1052. Today I will be presenting current audit file and also the audit program. The current audit file is referred to the audit documentation prepared for the current financial year. It includes audit evidence, working paper, financial statement, and also audit conclusion. Its purpose is to record the audit work performed and to support the auditor's opinion for that period. Next is content of current audit file. The content of the current audit file includes several key documents. First, the audit program, which outline the audit procedure to be performed. Second, the working trial balance, which show the adjusted balance used during the audit. Third, schedule and analysis, which provide detailed breakdown of financial data for purpose adjusting and reclassifying entries, which are used to correct and properly present financial information. Finally, audit memoranda and corroborating document and explanation for audit's finding. Next is important of working paper. Working paper are important for several reasons. First, they are necessary for audit quality control purpose, ensuring that the audits meet required standard. Second, they provide assurance that the works delegated by the audit partner has been properly completed. Third, working papers serve as evidence that effective audit has been carried out. In addition, they help to increase the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness of the audit process. Finally, they retain a record of matters of continuing significance, which can be useful for future audits. According to ISA 230, audit working papers include several key content. First, they record the significant detail of audit work performed during the engagement, showing the procedure carried out by the auditor. Second, they include the overall audit strategy, the detailed audit plan, and any significant changes made during the audit process. Third, um, the document significant audit risks are defined together with the planned audit response. Finally, they capture significant matters arising during the audit, as well as important professional judgment made by the auditor. Overall, audit working paper ensure proper documentation of the audit process and support the auditor's conclusion. Next, we move to the audit program. An audit program is a set of instructions that the auditors need to follow for the proper execution of an audit. It is prepared by the auditor and contain detailed information on the specific audit procedure and steps that the audit team must carry out during the audit process. The purpose of an audit program is to ensure the audit is conducted in a systematic, efficient, and well-organized manner. There are several advantages of an audit program. First, it helps ensure that all important areas are properly considered during the audit process. Second, it assists the auditor in allocating work among team members according to their skill and competencies, improving efficiency. Third, it enhances the accountability of audit team members as each member is responsible for the work performed. Overall, the audit program improves the organization, effectiveness, and quality of the audit process. Lastly, we move to disadvantage of audit program. There are several disadvantages of an audit program. First, the auditor would become mechanical, which can reduce initiative and overall efficiency. Second, there is often a tendency to rush the work in order to complete it within the required time schedule, which may affect audit quality. Third, a rigid audit program cannot be applied to all type of businesses because each business has its own unique problems and circumstances. Overall, this limitation show that program must be used flexible and with professional judgment.
Assalamualaikum and selamat sejahtera. My name is Nur Hidayah and my matrix number is F1094. So I will explain about format of audit working paper. The first one is client name. This show the name of the company being audited, so the document is clearly identified. The second one is audit period cover. This indicates the specific time frame of the audit, so the scope of work is clear. The third one is subject matter. This explains what is being examined, such as account, transaction, or specific audit areas. The fourth one is file reference number. This is used for easing filling, organization, and quick retrieval of the working proper. The next one is prepared by initials or date. This show who prepared the working paper when it was done to ensure accountability. The last one is must meet characteristic of good working papers. The working paper must be complete, accurate, clear, and well organized so it can be used reliable of audit evidence. Now, I will explain about audit tick mark. The first one is symbol used by the auditor to show audit work done. Audit tick marks are symbols used by auditor to indicate the audit procedure that have been performed on specific items. The next one is written directly on working papers next to the items. These symbols are writing directly beside the relevant item in the working paper to clearly show what has been checked. The next one is help show nature and extent of audit testings. They help explain what type of audit work was carried out and making and how intensive the testing was, making the audit procedure easier to understand. For example, for symbol V, this means the auditor has verified the item with original document as evidence. Symbol F, this show the auditors has checked the mathematical accuracy of the figure. PY agree to prior year error and TB is agree to trial balance. Now I will explain about organization of audit working paper. The first one is the conclusion in audit working paper must be consistent with the audit test result and should be relevant enough to be checked by others independently. Next one, in each working paper must be clearly referenced so it can be easily found when needed later. The next one is it is prepared by audit staff or audit senior and they must sign it with initial and date to show responsibility and accountability. The next one is the working papers are then reviewed by senior managers or partners who also sign and date them to ensure proper quality control. The last one is after the audit is complete, the working paper become legal audit evidence. So they must properly organize, index and fill for future use. Now I will explain about ownership of working paper. The first one is working paper are owned by the auditor, but they must be kept confidential in line with professional ethics to protect client informations. For example, an auditor cannot disclose audit notes or findings to the third parties without the client's consent. The second one is although they may be useful for the reference, they do not form part of the client official accounting records and cannot replace them. For example, the client still needs to maintain its own accounting records like the cash book and invoice even in audit files exits. The last one is auditor are required to store working papers securely and keep them for a required period to comply with a legal and professional standard. For example, audit files are archived securely for several years in case they need for inspection or legal purpose. That's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Masara binti Kastari, F1025. Today, I will be presenting about audit sampling. According to the ISA 560, audit sampling is the application of audit procedure that less than 100% of item in a population. Auditors normally do not check every transaction because it would take lots of time and cost. Instead, they select a sample to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Auditor may not use audit sampling when there are only few numbers of value that make up a population. Also, there is a high risk material misstatement and sampling not give enough evidence. Next, I'm moving to the audit sampling process. There are 4 main steps in audit sampling process. First, auditor will identify population, which means deciding which transaction or account balance will be tested. Second, the auditor choose the sampling method, either statistical or non-statistical sampling. The third one is the auditor will perform audit procedures on the selected samples such as inspection or confirmation. And the final steps is the auditor will re-evaluate the findings and use them as a basis to form an audit opinion. This structured process helps auditors work efficiently while maintaining audit quality. Next, I will explain about statistical sampling. What is statistical sampling? Statistical sampling is a method of selecting and analyzing a sample of data using probability theory, where each item has a known chance of being chosen, allowing conclusion about the whole population to be made in a reliable and measurable way. This allows auditor to measure sampling risk and make more reliable conclusion about the population. It increases objectivity and provides stronger audit evidence supported by the quantitative analysis. Next is a non-statistical sampling. This method selects and evaluates samples based on professional judgment rather than statistical measurement. Not every item has a known probability of selection. Auditors usually focus on risky or unusual transaction because it's flexible and practical. This method is widely used in a real audit program. However, conclusion cannot be measured statistically. Last but not least, I would like to compare statistical and non-statistical sampling. For statistical sampling, items are selected randomly using probability theory. It is more objective because mathematical techniques are used and every item has an equal chance of selection. It also requires detailed documentation and conclusion. On the other hand, non-statistical sampling depends on the auditor's professional judgment. This selection is more subjective and based on experience. Documentation is usually less formal. Both methods are acceptable and commonly used in auditing practice.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Ain Umira binti Zainuddin, and I will continue to explain definition of sampling risk. Sampling risk is the risk that the auditor's conclusion based on a sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population is tested. This occurs because the sample selected may not fully represent the actual production. As a result, the auditor may make an incorrect conclusion based on incomplete information. So now I will explain types of error. So according to International Standards on Auditing or ISA 530, sampling risk may result in two types of incorrect conclusions. So first, the auditor may conclude that internal control are effective or that no material misstatement exists, when in fact a misstatement is present. This may lead to an inappropriate audit opinion. So the second is the auditor may conclude that internal control are not effective or that a material misstatement exists, when in fact is no misstatement. Although this does not affect the audit opinion, it may result in unnecessary audit work and reduce efficiency. Next, I will explain how to reduce sampling risk. First, increasing the number of sample sites. A larger sample size improves the reliability and accuracy of audit results because it better represents the overall population. As a result, it reduces the risk of making incorrect conclusions. The second is using statistical samples to focus on high-risk areas. This method allows auditors to select samples based on risk and focus on high-risk items such as large or unusual transactions. Therefore, it increases the likelihood of detecting errors or misstatements. So both methods help improve audit quality and reduce sampling risk. So the next part is non-sampling risk. Non-sampling risk is the risk that an auditor may reach an incorrect conclusion that is not caused by the sample itself, but due to other factors in the audit process. This means even if the sample is correct, the auditor can still make mistakes. There are a few causes of non-sampling risk. First, the auditor may misinterpret audit evidence. This can happen due to lack of knowledge, limited experience, or time pressure. Second, it can happen when the auditor designs poor or inappropriate audit procedures, which leads to incorrect results or conclusions. So non-sampling risk is mainly caused by human error and poor audit judgment, not the sampling process. So next, I will explain the types of audit tests, which are tests of control and substantive tests. So first, test of control, also known as compliance test. This test is used to examine the effectiveness of a client's internal control system. Auditors will perform procedures such as inquiries, observation, inspection, and performance to ensure that the controls are working properly. Second, substantive test. This test is conducted when the internal control system is weak or not reliable. It involves detailed examination to evaluate the accuracy and reasonableness of financial statement items. Auditors may use procedures such as recalculation, confirmation, and analytical procedures. So now, sampling techniques. For a test of control, auditors use attribute sampling. This method selects samples based on specific characteristics such as whether a transaction is properly authorized. For example, auditor may check the authorization of payments or segregation of duties. At the end, auditor will conclude whether the internal control system is effective or not. For substantive tests, auditors use probability proportional to size or PPS sampling. This method selects samples based on monetary value, where higher value items have a higher chance of being selected. It is commonly used for testing transaction or account balance, and it helps auditors detect misstatements more effectively. In conclusion, audit documentation ensures that all audit work is properly recorded and well organized in a systematic way. Audit sampling helps auditors obtain sufficient and reliable audit evidence efficiently,
without examining all items. So both statistical and non-statistical sampling support auditors in making reasonable audit conclusions. Overall, this concept improves the efficiency, accuracy, and quality of the audit process. So that's all from our group. Thank you.